My name is Roma, and this is Zimlove, a podcast about a feeling that I try to describe through the stories and anecdotes and perspective of others, wonderful people that I've met. And through their stories, I want to change the thoughts and the feelings that people have when they think about this beautiful place. Because once you put it into Google, all that pops up is expensive safaris or hyperinflation or even different stories. But there's a specific feeling to this place. And I want to show you through the eyes of others that after all everyone has been through and is going through, there is still a feeling that is true Zim love.
We have a problem in that as a nation, we do not have the exact number of languages that are spoken in the country. There are estimates. People estimate that in Zimbabwe there is between 16 to 22 languages that are spoken. But again, this must be taking into account issues to do with dialects, because some of the varieties that we are calling languages are actually dialects.
This interview was recorded with Doctor Ndlovu from the University of Zimbabwe. He's a lecturer at the Department of Language, Literature and Culture. He's teaching African languages, editing, translation, language policy. So he's a very multilingual person, and he's going to talk with us about the future of African languages. This interview was recorded during COVID times in Zimbabwe. I was sitting very far away from the doctor, so the questions were re-recorded while editing this podcast. I hope you enjoy this episode of Zim Love. In the first episode, we spoke with John about Tonga language and culture. Tonga is not just a language, it's also a tribe. So when you speak about 16 official languages in Zimbabwe, does it mean that there are also 16 tribes?
Yes, because what will this then mean is that these are people who belong to different ethnic groups. Because what I've discovered is people are no longer comfortable with being called, tribes. They prefer the term ethnic groups, which they feel is politically neutral and more sensitive. So what then happens is that you find that if you say you are Tonga, it means that you belong to a particular ethnic group. So this means that Zimbabwe is endowed with all these different ethnic groups, that constitute the different languages that we are saying are spoken in this particular country.
The different ethnic groups, does it still play a role in today's society?
Yes, definitely they do play a critical role in our society, because we are saying one of the key defining features of our nation is that we are linguistically diverse, we are multicultural in nature. And each group brings its own unique, aspects in terms of culture, in terms of language, which are a critical component in terms of ensuring, peace in the nation, coexistence. So the fact that we need to coexist, the fact that we need to appreciate and recognize each other is what then explains why we are, coexisting. Well, we have had our own problems as a nation, which have really seen some of our language groups engaging in some forms of language activism because they were feeling that they are marginalized. If you look at languages like Tonga, they were not so much visible as Ndebele or Shona. They were somewhat marginalized in our society. And it took some form of language activism through bottom-up approaches to language planning and policy for these languages to be where they are at the moment. I've, in a number of settings, in a number of conversations, tried to assist our citizens and the nation at large to understand and appreciate that in Zimbabwe we do not have official languages. What we have are officially recognized languages, and these two are different. Countries like South Africa have official languages, but in Zimbabwe, these are officially recognized languages.
What is then the official language in Zimbabwe?
What we have as the de facto, the unsaid, in terms of policy, official language seems to be English. Because what defines an official language in any nation is that it becomes the language of record. It is the language of business. It is the language of governance, the language of education, the language of administration. So given that English is the language that is serving all these functions in Zimbabwe, it then assumes that de facto function of being the official language of Zimbabwe. What we have seen is that in as much as people want to identify with the English language, they are emphasizing that their children are exposed to the English language as early as kindergarten. There is still that connection with their own mother tongues. They still want to identify with their local languages. The challenge that we had in Zimbabwe is that English was at the top, and then followed by Shona, and then Ndebele. And because of that, those who spoke the other languages, which are not Ndebele, Shona, or English, they felt that the government was attempting to actually assimilate them into the broad two local languages, depending on the province that you are found in. You will notice that Zimbabwe is divided mainly along linguistic, boundaries. We have Mashonaland, which really then is Shona, Matebele land, which is Ndebele. And in the main, the Tonga people in particular, they voiced out their opinion to say that why are we being called the people in Matebele land when we are not Matebele or when we are not Ndebele? Because labeling them that way or assuming that they are part of the Matebele people is to then try and assimilate them into the Ndebele identity. And because of that, that is the reason why they strongly feel that their language must be promoted, their language must be recognized. And they've even gone to the extent of saying that in their districts, be it in Binga or in Kariba, where Tonga is predominantly spoken, they've resisted the teaching of Ndebele and Shona. They want their Tonga to be taught as the sole local language alongside English, because there is that strong feeling that teaching their children Ndebele will contribute to a situation where their children will be assimilated into the Ndebele group, and then they will lose their identity of being Tongas.
Looking at globalization, would you say that local languages are fading out during time? Where do you see the future of local languages? Should people in Germany, people all over the world now start to learn local languages like Tonga, Shona, Ndebele?
There is a new wave of linguistic nationalism that is now taking place around the globe. And it dates back really as back at the 19th century, where people even started talking about the need to preserve biodiversity. The drive of preserving biodiversity has also manifested in the drive of trying to also promote and preserve linguistic diversity. There is this strong wave of people who are saying that no language should die. Remember, the United Nations in 2019 set aside the whole year 2019 as the Year of Indigenous Languages with the aim of promoting the preservation, the revitalization, the maintenance, and the promotion of all the local languages which are threatened by extinction. So the future is bright if we are to embrace the drive of UNESCO, the drive of UN, of promoting and preserving all local languages, because languages are linked to issues to do with rights. I'm a language rights scholar as well, and I strongly believe that the key, the avenue, the foundation, the basis for the enjoyment of all the other basic human rights which people are entitled to is the language rights. If you are entitled to the right to health, the right to justice, and that right is not guaranteed in your language of choice, it is as good as you are not guaranteed that right. You cannot talk about the right of access to information without guaranteeing that right of access to information in one's preferred language. Because if you talk about us having rights of access to information, but that information is in languages that we do not understand, it is as good as we are not guaranteed that particular right. So given that interconnection between language rights and the other basic human rights, and given the centrality of language rights in the enjoyment of all the basic human rights that people are entitled to, it makes it clear that there is going to be that strong wave and strong push and drive to actually foreground, to valorize and promote all the languages so that everyone enjoys their basic human rights. So this then points to the need to preserve and promote all the local languages, even to the point of a dialect.
Looking at academia, those local languages are being studied by native speakers. So the languages themselves are objects that are being studied linguistically, literature, culture-wise. When you think about publishing in those languages, this is even something that you think about when you publish in German. Should you even publish in German, or should you maybe publish in English, depending on what kind of audience you would like to reach? Would you say that looking at the future of local languages, you should also look into that?
This is a very critical point that you are raising, Roma. I think one of the key things, what really constitutes language development, is for us to get to a point of using these languages in what are called high-function domains. If we get to that particular point of saying that Tonga can be a language for research, Tonga can be a language for scientific inquiry, then would have hit the mark. And there is still that need. I've been working, behind the scenes to say that it is mandatory, and we expect all universities in Zimbabwe, if all things are equal, and if as a country we are really serious about implementing the provisions of Section 6 of our Constitution, promote the development of all the languages in Zimbabwe, including sign language. If you are doing computer science, if you are doing informatics and communication, if you are going to be doing Ndebele and Shona, it allows you then to also stretch yourself and be able to use Ndebele within that particular domain. And this will actually enable our languages to migrate into the cyberspace. This will actually allow us to even be able to use Google or search using Google, using our own local languages. And if you look at what is currently happening, our languages do not have spell checkers. And that makes it very difficult for us to type. If you put your phone on autocorrect and then you're typing in the local languages, you risk at times, typing vulgar because it autocorrects to English because it does not recognize the Ndebele, Shona, Tonga spelling.
Do you think it's realistic that there is going to be such a rise in Shona, Ndebele, and Tonga speakers that there's going to be an own academic discourse besides just being inside the language speakers?
It is realistic. It's very possible. If Kiswahili has done it, what will stop us? Zulu, very close at home, which is a sister dialect to Ndebele. They're already there. Xhosa is already there in the space. It is possible. Shona, to some extent, is now visible on Google. It is possible. I think what we need to do, the problem that we currently have is that we do not have that kind of close-knit collaboration with those with the technical know-how, those from the computer science or computer engineering or informatics, who can come and partner with us, the side. As we have the linguistic knowledge, the linguistic background, but we do not have the technical know-how of moving our languages in that particular space.
Talking about recognized languages and what is spoken when. English is the language that seems to be spoken most. Of course, the colleagues at the university speak mostly English to me. To each other, maybe they speak English, mostly Shona. In a professional academic context or in a seminar room, English is the language that is being spoken. Would you say that there's a socio-linguistic background to what is spoken when?
As a nation, we are existing in what is called a diglostic situation, where English is right at the top as the high variety. And then after English, there is Shona in Zimbabwe as the high variety for all the local languages. Shona enjoys prestige. It's actually the dominant language, local language in Zimbabwe. And then comes Ndebele, because it's all to do with the politics of language in Zimbabwe, which date as far as back as the colonial period, when one of the scholars, Clement Dock, made the recommendation that English would be the language, then Ndebele and Shona would be the local languages. That then defined, the kind of the relationship that exists between our languages in Zimbabwe. But we are seeing a change in that, because the local language groups which were previously marginalized, They are now also, pushing for the recognition of their languages, and it's already happening. In terms of policy, yes, they are all 16 officially recognized languages, but in terms of practice, English is still at the top, followed by Shona, and then Ndebele, and then Tonga. We are still trying to understand and to also pick which then other language comes after Tonga, because I'm looking at the kind of aggressiveness, the kind of linguistic nationalism that defines the Tonga people. They actually top the list when we compare them with the other previously marginalized languages. This is why I'm saying they are coming after Ndebele. But what we are sure of is that in terms of preferences, English still enjoys that prominence that we cannot dispute. But we are also happy that there is that element of now trying to embrace our local languages. There is that change.
For me and for a lot of people on the outside, there's something linguistically specific about Ndebele, something special. And it is that it's the only local language that has clicks in it. Now, there are more languages in Southern Africa that have clicks in them. And it's something very foreign and special to us. Can you please explain?
Well, Ndebele, as I've said, is a dialect of a family called Nguni. This constitutes isiZulu, isiXhosa, isiSwati, and South African Ndebele. So these languages had this close interaction with the Khoi people. This is where these click sounds are coming from. In Ndebele, they are called Ongwaqa Batwa. Ongwaqa Batwa. Literally meaning that these are consonants that are coming from the Khoi people. Abatwa is the Khoi people. So these are sounds which we picked from the Khoi people. Remember, the Ndebele people are migrating from down south. And down south, there, especially the Xhosa, this is where the Khoi people were predominantly found. So they stayed for quite some time, the Xhosa people, in close proximity with the Khoi people. And among the Nguni varieties, the Xhosa language has the highest number of clicks because of their proximity to the Khoi people. The click sounds are a foreign sound to the Ndebele people, which they borrowed from the Khoi people. So as a Nguni family, this is not originally Nguni. It's a sound that we picked from the Khoi family. So in Ndebele, there are three radical clicks. We have the dental click, and then we have the palatal click, and then we have the lateral click. So those are the three, basic click sounds that we have, but they can be combined. You can nasalize them, you can aspirate them to also derive other possible combinations using those particular basic click sounds.
So you, Doc, you are Ndebele.
Yes, I'm claiming to be Ndebele, but if I'm to trace my roots in terms of, my descendants, my parents, where exactly they came from, especially the paternal side, I'm told that I'm Kalanga. Mm-hmm. But if you look at Ndebele as a society, it was a society that had three groups. Three ethnic groups made up the Ndebele society. The pure Ndebeles are the Abezansi. These are the people who came with King Mzilikazi down south. Those are the pure Ndebeles. And then there is what are called Abentla. These are the people that the Ndebeles captured on their way to Zimbabwe, the Sotho people. And then there is the last group, Amahole. These are the people who were the original inhabitants of what is called the present day Zimbabwe, Matabeleland side, where, the Ndebele settled. So on arrival, they found people such as the Kalanga people, who are also believed to be part of the Rosy. Well, there is debate, but, linguistically and historically, there's been that evidence that they are linked to the Rosy community.
When you talk about Ndebele people, there are certain stereotypes that I've also heard about. One is that they are warriors, and the other one is that they have beautiful women.
That's what people say. That's what people say about us. Well, there are other negative, stereotypes that, have been, associated with the Ndebele people. One of them is that they say that we love meat. Well, going back into our past, really, that was one of our lifestyle. You know, in Ndebele, they used to say, umbuso weNdebele ukathathu. If you're in Ndebele men, these are some of the key things that would define you. The number of women that you married, they encouraged polygamy. Number 2, the number of cattle that you kept. You know, a man among the Ndebele people was respected because of the size of the head that he had, you know. And then number 3, you know, the love for beer, homemade traditional beer. That's what, you know, constituted umbuso wamaNdebele, inyama, abesifazana, utshwala. You know, those were the key things that people, you know, said defined the Ndebele people. Well, going into the colonial period, people used to say that we walk around carrying cups, some knives. I'm not sure, I don't have one, but those are stereotypes. And of course, yes, you have said that they're saying that we have beautiful women. Yeah, that's what people say. But, well, they've gone to the extent of saying that our women are loose. But I don't know. You know, these are people who are saying, you know, people always, you know, say, but I think it's just what people think and conceptualize. At times, you know what happens with stereotypes. If one person from a particular ethnic group does something, it is then associated with the rest. Because in Ndebele, there is a proverb that says, zonelwa mvunye. If one person is that particular mistake, as long as they belong to a particular group, it is then associated with them.
The group.
Yeah, so those are stereotypes, as you rightly say.
Yeah.
You know.
Something I ask everyone is if there is a saying, a proverb, a story in their mother tongue. So for you, Ndebele or Kalanga, that catches something of the spirit of Zimbabwe, some Zimlove, and that you would say is typical Zimbabwean.
Among the Ndebele people, you don't, you know, travel and then say, I'm stuck, and then you sleep outside or in the bush. In the Ndebele, you know, culture, there's a proverb that says, isisu somhambi asinganani, singangophonjwana lwembuzi. Meaning that if you know a goat, it's got a horn, and the horn of a goat is not that too big. So we are saying, if you look at the stomach, the tummy of a person who's a traveler, it's not that too big that they will even finish your, you know, your grain or whatever you have in your granary. So it's encouraging us to be hospitable, to take care of, you know, those who are visiting. And we also believe that unyawo alula mpumulo, that's another proverb. Unyawo alula mpumulo, meaning that you don't know where you're going to find yourself in tomorrow. It could be the one who's in Germany. And if you ill-treated a German in Zimbabwe, expect the same kind of treatment when you get there. And we also say, ehambayo ayiqedi tshani, meaning that a traveler would not really contribute to a situation where your grain is finished. They will not really eat away all the food that you have. So be that kind to share whatever you have, because they will not eat everything that you have. So we really emphasize that point of saying, umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. We value each other.
And how would you greet someone in Ndebele?
Well, it also depends on, for example, if I'm meeting that particular person for the very first time, you've not met in the morning or the previous day, the best way to greet would be to say, sakubona.
Sakubona.
Yes, sakubona. It's similar to Zulu, it's similar to Xhosa. Sakubona. And then the person will respond, Yebo.
Yebo.
Yes. And then they'll ask you, kunjani?
Kunjani.
Meaning, how are you? And then I'll respond, ngiyaphila, kunjani wena? I'm okay or I'm well, how are you doing yourself? And then the person will respond, I'm well, thank you. Ngiyaphila. It's very rare for us to respond and say, no, things are not okay. Even if things are bad, we have learned to respond in the positive.
Yeah, very nice. So can we try this? But I forgot already.
Yeah. Yeah. Sakubona.
Yebo.
Kunjani?
I'm fine.
Ngiyaphila. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Doc.
No, most welcome, Roma, and thanks
for having the time.
Thank you so much for also affording me the opportunity to also share my own experiences and Ndebele speaker with you.
It was a pleasure. Yebo, thank you very much, Doc, for taking the time for this interview. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of Zim Love.